Welcome to the Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea De La Cerda, and each week I'm bringing you the latest discussions and news about changes in the landscape of education and entrepreneurship. As a 22-year entrepreneur, corporate executive, business coach, and leader, I mentor a community of change-making men and women to get out of their box and step into their true calling to make the biggest impact on this world. This podcast is all about empowering us all, navigating life's twists and turns, and stepping into the fullest version of who we're meant to be. We're living in a culture that glorifies exhaustion. Wake up at 5 a.m., work while everyone else sleeps. Never stop grinding, push harder, do more, want more, achieve more. Somewhere along the way, hustle became a badge of honor. And I find especially for women. But what if we've confused motion with progress? What if working harder isn't actually the answer all the time? Today, I want to explore one of the biggest lessons that I've learned after spending decades in corporate leadership, building multiple businesses, coaching entrepreneurs, and completely rebuilding my own life. Alignment creates opportunities that hustle never can. There are a few things I've come to believe more deeply than this. A river doesn't reach the ocean because it hustles harder than every other river. It gets there because it's moving in the direction it was created to go. It doesn't compare itself to the river beside it. It doesn't panic when it encounters a rock. It doesn't quit when the path bends unexpectedly. It simply continues flowing patiently, consistently, trusting that every turn, every obstacle, and every season is still carrying it toward its destination. Somewhere along the way, I think many of us forget this, but let nature be our teacher. Instead of trusting the current, we started trying to force the water. We've been taught that if we're not exhausted, we're probably not working hard enough. That if we're not constantly busy, maybe somehow we're falling behind. That our worth is measured by productivity rather than by presence. But nature, again, tells a very different story. Let's explore why alignment and not hustle is one of the greatest competitive advantages we can cultivate in our business and in life. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know that achievement has always been a big part of my story. I learned early that hard work created opportunity. In growing up, success often felt connected to being responsible, dependable, and productive. And later, those same traits served me well for a time. I built a successful corporate career. I led organizations. I worked with hundreds of clients around the world from some big brands, built businesses, won awards. And from the outside, it looked like everything was working. But beneath the surface, I was constantly striving. Every accomplishment quickly became the starting line for the next one. I rarely paused long enough just to even ask, do I actually want this? Or perhaps more importantly, is this version of success actually mine? By 2022, my body answered the question for me. I was in burnout, completely exhaustion, 100%. A deep sense that I had built an impressive life that no longer fit the person I was becoming, and it was only going to fall apart. That season didn't simply change my career. It changed how I define success. And this isn't just my experience. This is cultural. For decades, we've celebrated people who sacrifice sleep, sacrifice relationships, health, and presence in pursuit of achievement. Social media then amplified it. Entrepreneurship celebrated it. Corporate America rewarded it even. And entire industries were built around productivity hacks. Yet the research paints a very different picture. The World Health Organization now recognizes burnout as an occupational phenomenon resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Gallup continues to report high levels of employee disengagement worldwide, suggesting that many people are working harder while feeling less connected to their work. And meanwhile, studies published in organizational psychology consistently demonstrate that chronic overwork reduces creativity, impairs decision-making, weakens strategic thinking, and increases the likelihood of mistakes. In other words, working longer does not necessarily produce better outcomes. In fact, it often produces worse ones. Alignment isn't about doing less, though, to be clear. It's about doing what matters most at that particular time. It's the difference between rowing harder and rowing in completely the wrong direction. Alignment means your values, your purpose, your calendar, your relationships, your work, and your identity are all moving toward the same destination together. And when they're not, that's when life can feel heavy. And when they are, There's still hard work to be done, but it no longer feels like constant resistance, if you know what I mean. One of the things I love about spending time outdoors here in Utah is that nature constantly reminds me that force isn't the primary strategy for growth. A tree doesn't hustle to become taller. It grows because it's rooted. Rivers don't force their way through mountains by pushing harder every day. Over time, consistency reshapes the landscape. Even the seasons remind us that rest isn't failure. Winter isn't the opposite of growth. It's part of growth. And yet somehow we've convinced ourselves that humans should operate differently than every other living system on Earth. Some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs eventually discovered this lesson. Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard famously resisted many traditional growth strategies because they conflicted with his own environmental values. Brené Brown spent years researching vulnerability before building a global company around the ideas many publishers initially believed wouldn't even resonate. Reed Hastings transformed Netflix multiple times, not because he stubbornly protected the original business model, but because he stayed aligned with the deeper mission of serving customers as technology evolved. Their success didn't come from blindly working harder. It comes from what I call the alignment advantage. It came from making decisions aligned with their principles, even when those decisions seemed unconventional. The alignment advantage is what happens when your values, identity, purpose, relationships, work, and energy begin moving in the same direction. The result isn't just greater fulfillment, it's greater effectiveness. Alignment doesn't replace discipline, it multiplies it. I've coached founders working 80-hour weeks who couldn't clearly explain why they were doing half of the things they were doing on their calendars. I've also coached entrepreneurs working fewer hours whose businesses grew faster because every decision supported one aligned vision. One nonprofit leader came to me convinced that she needed a bigger marketing budget, but she didn't. She needed a clearer story. And another entrepreneur believed she needed another certification, already having 3. What she really needed was permission to launch, and that getting another certification was just a distraction that she was subconsciously attracted to. And another founder had built a business she secretly hated. From the outside, it generated impressive revenue, but from the inside, it no longer reflected the person that she'd become. None of those challenges were solved by working harder. They were solved by becoming clearer. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan developed a self-determination theory, one of the most influential frameworks in motivational psychology. Their research suggests that human beings thrive when 3 core psychological needs are met. First, autonomy, then competence, and connection. Notice what's missing from that list, though. How about exhaustion, busyness, constant achievement? They don't apply. Research also shows that people who experience greater alignment between their personal values and their work report higher well-being, stronger resilience, and greater long-term motivation. Purpose isn't just emotionally satisfying, it's neurologically energizing. Sometimes hustle isn't ambition at all. Sometimes it's avoidance. Avoiding difficult conversations sometimes, avoiding rest, avoiding grief, avoiding uncertainty, avoiding the uncomfortable question, what if I'm chasing something that I no longer want? I know that question intimately. When I left corporate leadership, and even as I've left some of my businesses, I wasn't simply changing jobs. I was letting go of a former identity, one I had spent decades building sometimes. So that's really terrifying because achievement often becomes how we prove our worth. We've been taught that. Alignment, though, asks us to discover our worth before the achievement. I want to talk about 5 signs you're living maybe out of alignment. So consider these 5 and just think about it for yourself. First, success feels strangely empty. You reach the goal and immediately feel the need to chase after another one. Second, your calendar doesn't reflect your true priorities. Everything is urgent and almost nothing is meaningful then. Third, you say yes when your body is screaming no. I know many of us can relate to this. People pleasing can masquerade as professionalism. 4, you're constantly busy but rarely fulfilled. Motion has replaced intention. And then 5, you secretly envy people who are living differently. And sometimes envy isn't jealousy, it's information. It's pointing us toward a life your soul might be longing to create that it hasn't yet. Today, I still work incredibly hard, obviously, in many ways harder than ever before, but the energy feels different. I'm no longer trying to prove that I belong. I'm trying to build what I believe the world genuinely needs, aligned with what I genuinely believe that I can bring to it. That shift changed everything. It changes how I make decisions now, who I work with, clients I choose, how I define success, even how I recover, because I now understand something that I wished I'd learned 20 plus years ago. Success isn't simply about what you accomplish. I'm going to say that again. Success isn't simply about what you accomplish. It's about whether your accomplishments are creating a life that feels true to who you are. So I want to leave you with a few questions, not because I expect immediate answers, because these are difficult questions, but because good questions have a way of changing us. So I want you to ask yourself, where am I working harder instead of becoming clearer? What part of my life feels heavy because it's no longer aligned maybe with me? And what definition of success did I inherit rather than consciously choose? If no one else's expectations mattered, what would I build? What would I stop building? And perhaps the most important question of all, who am I trying to become? And does my life today actually support that person? The older I get, the less impressed I am by hustle. I'm far more inspired by people who know themselves, who lead with intention, that quiet confidence that they're able to carry because they know that they're so aligned with what they are here to do. People who build businesses without abandoning their families, who create wealth without sacrificing their health, who pursue purpose without losing themselves in the process. Because alignment doesn't remove hard work at all. There's still hard work. It just makes the hard work more meaningful. The most extraordinary lives aren't built by people who simply outworked everybody else. They're built by people who became courageous enough to stop living someone else's definition of success. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Inspired Podcast. I hope that you were able to get a couple of nuggets here and there. And if it resonated with you today, I'd love for you to share it with someone who's maybe been carrying the weight of hustle culture also on their back and wondering if there's another way. And remember, you don't have to earn your worth through exhaustion. That's not the play. You don't have to prove your value by staying busy. It's not what life's about. You don't have to keep climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do isn't working harder. It's choosing to live in alignment with who you were always meant to become. Until next time, keep rewriting your story. DM me at AndreaDLC_coach on Instagram and let me know your thoughts and if anything's coming up for you. I'm so glad you were able to join me today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with me, and I will see you next time on the Inspire Podcast. Take care. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. If you'd like to explore what your life could look like when your business and life are aligned with what you're really meant to do, get a business audit. I'll personally review your business, look at your social accounts, and give you some precise direction on what's working and how to create even more impact and income. Simply go to AndreaDeLacerda.com, navigate to work with me, and select the business audit. Again, that's AndreaDeLacerda.com, work with me, and then select the business audit. And if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe. That way more content like this can be shared with you as soon as new episodes drop. Thanks so much for joining again. See you soon. Take care.